Saying thank you, Aaron. And again, thank you to everyone. This has been quite a great journey. And many of us practitioners of DE&I work within the digital school networks. It's crazy to think, but a little over a year ago, we started gathering on a weekly basis, imagining building coalition and power and sharing the best ideas. Um, One of our dear esteemed colleagues, Marcos Gonzalez, I think then created kind of a connection with the ISN folks, with Chris and Aaron and Kim. And out of that was born a number of opportunities, including kind of hosting our own workshops within the Ignatian Family Teaching. And then from there, an opportunity, as Aaron said, this semester to bring back some of the best of those conversations and those videos, and really offer one more chance for folks to be in a Q&A session with those that created those sessions. And this one in particular, with Carlos and Deborale, are two of my colleagues, but more importantly, of my friends who I have a tremendous amount of admiration for, who have long histories and experience in the work that they're talking about and beyond. And today, just really thrilled. I think this topic is so germane in terms of how do we embed DE&I plus A work into our strategic plans, and then most importantly, have those become a part of our institutions that live beyond ourselves and our personalities. And so we're excited about having you, and I've probably done more talking than I need to. So at this point, I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Carlos Jimenez.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I just getting a call. Forgive me. Okay. Uh, Thank you everyone for joining us. It's I'm delighted to see a lot of you, a lot of familiar faces. Sorry. um, the challenges of doing remote, Zoom, working from the office. Yeah. So this is as Jamal was saying. This is this opportunity to be here with all of you comes from this movement within our Jesuit schools to it really started just with our DI practitioners, my colleagues from over 50 schools, or I forget how many schools were in the network, and eventually has really grown. We were then blessed with the opportunity to then for the Ignatian family teaching that we would usually gather in DC to do a virtual one. So we were saying like, hey, let's present as we're seeing this movement. It started, of course, the national reckoning in with the murder of George Floyd, with the protests in the summer of 2020. But as we know, this is something that has been happening in our country and in our communities, in our institutions for much, much longer. So we were able to organize and present some workshops that were really geared towards how can we better address the needs and the issues that are present within our Jesuit institutions or in Catholic institutions, independent institutions, around issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-racism. Some of that, again, realizing that, again, if we focus specifically on Jesuit schools, but even again other Catholic schools that might not be Jesuit, it is part of our mission, and our mission that is not only about educating students academically, not only helping them their personal formation in their faith and in their spirituality, but also as we're forming the leaders of tomorrow, that we want for them to be men and women formed with others, to be hope-filled individuals wanting to work for justice. We cannot ignore issues of DEI and the reality of our country that is smeared with challenges related to race, to identity, to exclusion. So this is the genesis of how this started, right? And then again, it really, as we were presented with the opportunity to present topics that were really relevant to our own experiences and our own context, it really coincided with some of the work that we have been doing here at Bellarmine. We are in San Jose, California, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, and Our Bellarmine, the institution that I work at, it's founded in 1851, 170 years old, and wonderful place. I am a graduate of Bellarmine, really changed my life in so many great ways, but also recognizing that we have a lot of challenges as an institution that has this wonderful history, this wonderful tradition, but it's also full of, again, challenges regarding who comes to our school, what is their experience, what are we teaching our kids, and again, issues of belonging, issues of who works here, right? Representation, and our faculty and our leadership and our board. Again, our curriculum and our overall experience of our students as our community has diversified throughout the decades, very different now than it was like 50 years ago, 20 years ago, 100 years ago. How are we serving our students? And then that has really led to the work of the creation of a strategic plan, which was what we're still undergoing it. It's been a long process, and of course in the last year or so with the pandemic and everything that's been going on, we have encountered even more challenges that not only in the drafting and execution of the plan, but also in the challenges that have arisen in our community. So that is basically, again, why we're here and why we're doing this work. And through this process, meeting wonderful people. Again, I knew Jamal from many years ago. Deborale, I got to meet recently. Again, we haven't even met in person, right? A lot of these people that I call dear colleagues and friends, we have been meeting consistently, through Zoom, and we're very excited about meeting in person, hopefully in Cleveland next in June. So anyway, with that, I'm delighted that you're here. Really excited to answer any questions you might have, and I'm going to pass the baton now to Deborale, who's going to speak about like the process of the strategic plan, how that goes. Thank you.
Hello, I'm absolutely honored to be here among a group of folks who are committed to DEI work at various institutions. I'm new to this group, and so I want to thank you all for being so very welcoming as I kind of maneuver my way around Jesuit education. So I am the Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at St. Ignatius High School in Cleveland, Ohio. Been in that position now about 2 years, but I have been doing DEI work for the past 20 years, maybe, both in higher education at faith-based, secular, and private schools, and also in corporate America. So I recently joined this team from doing this, being a chief consultant in the corporate world. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited to have an opportunity to collaborate with you to get this work done on your campus. I'll say that Carlos did an amazing job of he and Jamal both, of laying out the why we do this work and what's happened over the last 12 months, which has been pretty impactful for all of us. But it's important to know that that conversations and training in this space is not enough, which is why I appreciated the opportunity to talk about strategic planning, because strategic planning is an intentional way to ensure that you are embedding this work within your institution, the systems within your institution, and it's also about sustaining this work. And one of my colleagues, just said, this is not about the work I do, this is about the work we do, and certainly the way we honor all of us, or those who put their blood and sweat into this work, is to institutionalize things. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to look at both sessions, pre-recorded sessions. And so I won't belabor my comments by going through each point, but I want to make two quick distinctions between a compliance audit. So I've spent some time in my consulting business, both doing audits for companies and for schools. And I'll tell you, there are two pretty basic audits. Initially, someone will ask you to come in and do a compliance audit. And that really is, are we ethically doing within our industry what we are supposed to be doing? And people often see that more of kind of, it's generally quantitative, so it's generally number driven. People often see that as kind of your affirmative action look. It's often what leads people to believe that you have a quota system in place. You're looking for a set number of individuals of color, or you're looking to diversify your gender base or your ability base, your sexual orientation base. So can we check the box? And often that's where organizations will stop. Okay, we've got some Black folks, check. We've got some women, check, right? We're doing really well. We have an MLK program, check, right? So they're looking to check the box. The second piece, I think, which is hopefully kind of what we are promoting here, is not only that piece of looking at the numbers, but certainly cultural audits. And in that cultural audit, we're looking at kind of the norms, the behaviors within your organization, the language. Is there common and inclusive language? This type of research can be both qualitative, which is very good. You want to talk to people, you want to hear those stories, but it's also quantitative. And people often wonder, where do you get that data? I would suggest that your organization is probably already collecting the data, but you may not be using it for DEI purposes. So it's things like senior surveys. It's things like employee surveys. For us, we just completed the Intergage survey. So it's feedback from employees. It's if you participate in a best workplace survey, that'll give you some information. Employee exit interviews when they leave your schools. It's information you gather at town hall meetings, department meetings. It's complaints you get. It's, how often are people utilizing PTO or sick time, and what are they using it for? So there are a plethora of ways to gather the data to get a sense of kind of your cultural audit. It is how your organization looks, right? Is it inclusive in its appearance? I may have shared during my presentation that one of the things that made me aware of this when my children were young is my son, who was in a faith-based school, came home and said, "Mommy, where do Black people go when they die?" Which I thought, okay, you're a first grader. That's a little deep for me, over hot dogs and French fries, right? And because he didn't see pictures of Black angels, he only saw white angels. So he had no idea, like, what's gonna happen to me. And this is a faith-based institution that certainly cares about, the spiritual formation of students, but they had not given thought to what message are we really sending to our students in our community. It's also important to remember that this is mission-driven work. You won't get to any place if you don't ground this in who you are as an institution. So make sure that you keep that in mind. You need to be honest in your assessment, right? You need to have a group of folks that you pull together and you close the door and you say, let's be real. Who are we? And that's the group that you grapple with, and kind of what stays in that room. I call them Vegas spaces. What is said in this room stays in this room, but we need to do an honest assessment of who we are and actually who we want to be. I can't stress the importance enough of having common language, so that when you say diversity, when you say equity and inclusion, your community, you're all speaking the same language, right? If I learned that, again, early as I arrived at St. Ignatius, I said diversity, people instantly thought race. Okay, in my work, we call it the Big 8. There are other dimensions beyond just race that you need to include when you're thinking about diversity. And the last piece I'll say is just the importance of accountability when you begin to embed however you develop, whatever your goals are, whatever your action plan, there needs to be some accountability for that, and someone needs to be responsible for it. So I will stop there, and Jamal, I'll throw it back to you, and we can open it up if people have questions.
That was amazing. Thank you for both of you and Carlos for getting us started. So we've got a really great intimate group right now. And really the goal of this was to offer an opportunity to be in conversation There were a couple of questions that were emailed prior to us gathering today. But I also want to make sure that for those that are here, maybe something you just heard sparked a question that you wanted to bring forward. I would say there's multiple methods. We definitely don't want to step on each other, but I would suggest if you want to use the chat, myself and Aaron are kind of curating it and queuing up questions. Or if you just raise your hand or use the raise your hand button in Zoom, we can just, I think we're professional enough to allow you to verbally ask your question to Carlos or Deborale. So Sheri, awesome. You're not going to let me have that awkward silence where I'm trying to decide which way to pivot. I am going to pass it to you to ask your question. Thank you.
Having been in your position before, I try not to make other people squirm and suffer too long. That silence can really be deafening sometimes. Hello, everyone. I am Sheri King, and I am, as of 10 days ago, I am the inaugural Associate Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. I put in inaugural, I will probably be, thank you, I'll probably be in this position for about a year to year and a half while they do, so to give them time to do a national search. And extending my retirement a little bit longer, which I'm okay with because this is important work. Prior to this, I was director of student life. And so I did a lot with diversity, with DEI in my student programming things, but now I get to approach it campus-wide. So anything and everything that people say, I'm taking feverish notes for. Deborah, I have one question for you. I believe you just said, you were talking about it's not just about race. Just obviously the very first thing I'm having to deal with on my campus being definitely in the minority and having this role talking to people in the majority, and they automatically see Black, white. But I think you just said there's the other 8. What do you consider to be the other 8?
Sure. In this work, the big 8 are race and ethnicity, which are 2 separate concepts. People often use those terms interchangeably, and they are not.
Right.
It's age, it's gender, sexual orientation, religion, education, and ability.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because my community was completely fixated on race. And as a result of how we needed to pivot, as I was attempting to kind of expand their horizon, COVID hit. And it forced us to begin to think about other things, socioeconomic status. We had to start thinking about that and who had resources and who didn't. We had to start thinking about ability and our students who visit our Walton Center for academic support. Now those students are at home. So it allowed me to expand that bandwidth for them and say, hey, we've got Black and brown and white students who are all, financially struggling. They don't have internet at home. So now we can talk about resources and socioeconomics. We can talk about, do these folks have, not only do they have internet, but do they have technology at home? Do they have devices that they can take home? And so we had to do some loaner devices. We had to talk about families that only had 1 computer, but 4 kids who needed to get on and do homework. So it really allowed us to kind of expand that and move it beyond race, because we were in that moment. It also forced us to acknowledge that it's not just the Black and brown students who are financially strapped. So now we had to look at some white students, which opened up another kind of whole box of worms, right? Because on our campus, because they were so fixated on race, we had some white students who were kind of imposters, right? Because if you ask someone, tell me what you think about, St. Ignatius, kind of Cleveland, they would say white, they would say Catholic, male, rich, racist, right? If you can't check all 5 of those descriptors, you don't belong to our dominant culture. So we've got some white kids here who are poor, who are struggling, and we're overlooking those kids because we're so focused on who we believe the poor Black kids are. So those kids are kind of sitting in the back hoping that no one discovers that. And so as a result of all of this and having to come out and say, hey, we're struggling at home too, we've got dysfunctional families at home too, I think it opened our eyes to a lot.
Yeah, and I would add, that's yeah, absolutely interesting for us also, and I think across any institution, right? Then when you start looking at things like we're a Catholic school, right? But we have students that are not Catholic, right? And how do they feel spaces where they belong? Do we have affinity spaces? Do we in our language, are we using language that we affirm our Catholic identity and Jesuit identity, but we also say, we honor our brothers and sisters who are might be Muslim, Jew, etc., Jewish. We also like what Deborale is saying, like language, right? We have parents that that are not English speaking, right? In our inclusion, do we have processes in place in which when we send uh, any letters home or any information in our website, is it accessible? Like who's in your community, right? And are those opportunities also accessible? So I think, yeah, in terms of the identity, like it's really interesting. Citizenship, right? Do we have students that are undocumented? We have a lot in our community. So it really that's what it becomes really interesting as we begin to expand our concept of who's in our community and what is their experience. Then we basically this concept of we make the table bigger, right? And we add more seats. Or do we have, like, in terms of our students, do we have what do we mean by parents? Is it like single mom or single dad or two dads, two moms? And do we all these things that we don't really often, at least when I was in high school, we didn't maybe see a lot of these things. And now when we're in these spaces as an institution asking these questions, right? And then, as we were saying before, how do we then, as we start getting more like these definitions or who is in our community, how do we then embed it into every aspect of our community? So it's not just, we're not like just checking off in the list, as Deborale was saying, but it's like that we live and breathe, and we're inherently an inclusive and equitable institution.
Jamal, before you get to the next question, Carlos just said something. I'm not sure, I want to give a resource. I'm not sure if you are familiar with Parent Square. Parent Square is a software program that will allow you to, and we just finished our first year with our Modus program with our Welsh Academy, where we have families where English is not their first language. It will allow you to type, so it will translate the message for you, and it allows the parent on the other end to pick the language that they want translated, the language that they want to translate the message to. We have found that we've got an 80% increase in our engagement with families, because now they can read the messages that we are sending home, and they're not relying on a child to translate for them. Great program.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Yeah, man. Thank you. Yeah, we've been translating and kidding over our different language teachers to help get things done. So that helps. So we have some great questions, and what I want to do, I'm gonna start with I love the question that Clarissa offered up, because I think it's interesting and goes back to Carlos, who's been doing this a little bit at Bellarmine, and Deborale, who is, I believe, a few years into her tenure. So maybe the question for you both to consider would just be about budgeting for DE&I work. So one, I would say just the overall programming, but even maybe specific to this topic, budgeting or how you've procured the funds to actually do the strategic planning work, and was there money set aside prior to your tenure? So I'll let you guys pick your order, but I think you'd be instructed to hear, just because you guys both have some different lengths of time at your institutions.
Go ahead, Deborale.
You're muted, Deborale.
Okay, I was actually looking for my budget. I knew Carlos was going to do this. I was hoping to be able to pull up my budget and have an actual number. So I will say that I'm new to my position. So the vice president role was just created by Father Guillaume and our board 2 years ago. So I will be at St. Ignatius 2 years this upcoming August. DEI work has been on my campus for about 15 years. So we've had a director and an assistant director in those two positions for that amount of time. We also have a Magis Saturday program, which is our academic enrichment program for 5th through 8th grade boys. And I have 14 teachers who are external to the St. Ignatius community who come in on Saturdays and they teach. So I will say I do have an individual budget. It was here when I arrived. Certainly with the work that I am doing, I asked for an increase in that. And I would say the most recent increase was about $50,000 to do some assessment work, to provide some training opportunities, professional development opportunities for my community. Because I am, and I'm using those resources to not only, and we can talk about assessment later, but assess the cultural competence of my community, provide professional development opportunities. And what I know is that I think our faculty and staff get about $2,500 a year for professional development, and much of that money is already allocated to something else, right? I wanted to remove the barrier of, oh, Deborale, I would love to participate, but I don't have any professional development money. So I went to our CFO and said, I need money to do this work. We need money, additional money for programming. We already had a decent budget for programming, for professional development, to host meetings, to travel. And so yeah, while Carlos speaks, I can kind of look up that budget and give you $1 if you're interested in that. But the money has been, the resources, and it's not just about money, the resources have been there because I also in my role have administrative support because it is a full-time commitment. And I will say it's difficult to do this work a la carte, right? It's difficult to add it to a full-time teaching load, to a full-time, some other load. It's difficult to reduce, someone's teaching load by one class and expect them to be responsible for moving this initiative along. So I do not currently have a teaching load. I'm going to teach a class next year on civil discourse, but yeah, so I have quite a few resources. I have administrative support, and I have a director, actually an assistant director, an open director position that I will hopefully fill in the fall, but I do have resources.
Yeah, and I'll just add that one of the things that you just said, and I see some colleagues in the group right here that might understand. Yeah, I mean, in terms of resources, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone here. I don't know, but like Deborale, in my community, we have a lot of resources compared to other schools, neighboring schools, right? How we allocate those resources, I would hope, this is happening, something that predates me, right? The amount of money, and not just money, as you were saying, like just the time, the resources, the spotlight that is put, for example, in athletics, right, is nowhere near. I mean, like, this is athletics and we are down here, right? We're minuscule, and that's not, that's how it is, right? And that's how it's been. But for the most part, the budget that we say, hey, administration, we need to invest money on this. There's things that we can do internally, as the DI director. Yeah, I can lead workshops, I can do programming, and we can do that, or we can tap into our community, and because we have really great assets within our community. But we also need to spend money and bring, experts. We also need to spend money on PD, as Deborale was saying. We need to spend money on, like one of the things that we were talking about. How do we instead of rather us creating a survey to get the school climate, hey, we might invest in the AIM survey, right? It's a couple $1,000s, or the intercultural, what is it? The IDI, intercultural development inventory, right? That we have a colleague who's really well versed in it. Things like that. But the other point that Deborale was saying is like, yeah, like I know Jamal, you're with me, myself, you know, I don't do this full time, right? And yet, so that's one of the things that institutionally you would hope that we would have these positions like campus ministry, like CSP, Christian Service Program, like saying like, this is something important. It's who we are. It's based on mission. And it's about changing the culture and about of our schools and making sure that we're more inclusive. And yet we often rely on faculty that is not full-time and that, you know, so anyway, so that's something that we have to continue pushing, like more budget for those kinds of things. And of course, I know that it's difficult. And if we have principals, you know, that's not my realm. And I know I say that understanding that there's challenges, but how do we then create enough value in the work that we do, and not only create value, but also being recognized by the board and the administration to say like, yeah, we better spend, also allocate resources to DEI and more budget. So go ahead. I think, do you have the figure now, Deborale? No, I don't want to put you in the spot.
Well, I'll buffer for her a bit, and I don't want to center myself, but for those who don't know, I'm leaving Loyola to become a principal, and I had a 2-hour discussion with my current principal and the admin team, and the argument was, well, you know, like Carlos, I teach 2 classes, and I'm the director of diversity currently at Loyola High, and you know, it was being posited that, yeah, we could do something similar, and that role would be some combination of a bunch of other roles on campus. And I was pretty adamant to what Carlos said about, if this is important for Loyola going forward, that person should be given a space to solely focus on it, or you know, or be in collaboration. I think it's natural collaboration with our service department and things of that sort, but not necessarily to be teaching and also doing and be, you know, in charge of faculty observations, which are some of the things that I do right now in the current way it's situated. So to that end, I would echo to Carlos about that. And I think that'll get to my next question, but I don't know if Deborale, you're ready with your number, and then I can throw another question out there to you guys. And you're muted right now, just so you know.
Okay.
And I feel bad, we're putting you on the spot. And I'm
Yeah.
not even sure it's that instructive that folks have the number. Well, maybe they'll be like, God bless, we'll never get there.
I am trying to, okay, here it is. So I am pulling up. Oh, where are you? Okay. So my attached are your monthly numbers. Okay. So I have, and I'm sorry, she copies these sideways, so I know I look crazy, right? So as far as actual budgeted for the year, okay, I have about $28,000. So I have $28,000 in budgeting a year. I have that we do, and that's just for cultural programming. Why is this not making sense to me now? Okay, I have $6,000 for meetings and professional development. I have $10,000 to offer for honorariums. I have about a $10,000 general operating budget that I kind of use to collaborate with other departments. I have $5,000 for meetings. And so a fairly robust budget, and none of that includes salary. So I think yeah, none of that includes salaries. Let me look at one more item here.
Well, while you do that, maybe, because I think we'll keep keep everything going one way. I know it looks like Nate threw something. I do want to get to this question, and I'm going to kind of combine a couple things. Would be Carlos and Deborale, maybe think about similarly, like some of the best data gathering tools that you have used. I know Carlos, you talked about AIM and the inventory, maybe some other specific things maybe can help people think about it. But I really, the question I wanted to hear you guys talk about would be, how do you hold our institutions accountable? So first, I think what would be instructive might even be the resistance to start the strategic planning work. What were some of the things or language or methodologies you use to move the institution to say, hey, this is important and we need to do a strategic plan around this work? And then how are you all hoping to hold the institution accountable to that plan once it's either been created or the ones that you have created? I think that would be really helpful for all of us that are in attendance right now.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Carlos.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I think I talked about it in the talk, and I'll just say it really quickly. It really was. I'll answer it that two ways. I'm very fortunate that like my predecessors, we've been having a sort of this type of DEI. It wasn't called DEI back when it first started, but for about 25 years. So there have been folks coming before me that have done a lot of the initial work. So when about just 3-4 years ago, we have this thing called racial. It was a justice summit, and that has a particular topic. It was understanding race in the 21st century as a way for us as a community to really understand this big, again, societal issue that affects everyone. Even that, there was some resistance to that. So we had to spend a lot of time preparing our community, PD, etc. But we finally did it. And it was really wonderful. It involved students, it involved parents to a certain degree, our faculty. And the thing that came out of that was like, okay, we can talk about it. It's important because it affects everyone in our community. What do we do now, right? And as a way to then to avoid what we saying like, okay, great, we talked about race and inclusion and equity 1 year, we're done. So then that's why we started to create the strategic plan. Hey, we shouldn't do it ourselves, just us. Let's not reinvent the wheel. What's out there? The AIM survey, the Assessment of Inclusivity and Multiculturalism by the National Association of Independent Schools. That has been used by many different other schools, Jesuit schools. It's great. So we've been using that, but as a way to not only say, okay, here's Carlos again, wanting to talk about this topic. Okay, great, we're done. I can continue doing things as normal. As it's again a realization as an institution, as a community, that this is real, that it affects everyone, and that we should do this. And creating the strategic plan, including goals and milestones that, and as Nathan says, it's not just the DEI director who's responsible, it's everyone, right? It's department chairs, it's the assistant principal, it's the principal, it's the CFO, it's the different people within our communities saying like, this is not just something that one department does. It's we all do this because we are a Jesuit institution, and this is who we are, and this is part of our identity, right? Again, mission-based, as Deborale said. So I'll stop there. Go ahead, Deborale.
Yeah, I would say, like Carlos, I mean, I've only been here, 2 years. So this work was happening long before I got here. So a lot of the resistance in the community, I think, it's not new. The pushback is not new. How you engage the work is I think for us it's new. It's very clear to me. I use the gospel. I use mission. I use Catholic social teaching. I use grad. I use scripture. At the end of the day, what I am communicating to my community is all I'm asking you to do is be who you say you are. I'm not asking you to do anything else. Just be who you say you are. And using then some of the other pieces, using, this work for St. Ignatius is grounded in cura personalis. It is rooted there. It is rooted in social justice work. I tell people all the time, I left corporate America and that fantastic salary there, right? Because, when I was in corporate America, I left higher ed, went into corporate America. I didn't like what I saw. And so this job for me was intriguing because every day I have 1,500 boys in front of me who are formed in faith. And if I can help them understand and value DEI, not to be cliche, but that's a game changer. Like every day I walk around and I touch 1,500 boys, and I make a point to get out of my office and be in the lunch space and be on the fields and go watch them play and do all of those things, attend programmatic things. But this is not just my work. And I think that may, be, one of the disadvantages of how the work was done before. I don't do this work in a silo. And I made it really clear when I was interviewing that there's not a conversation because of how DEI cuts across every aspect of who we are. There is not a conversation on this campus that I can't be a part of. Now, I don't need to be, but if you're talking about sustainability, if you're talking about cost, there's absolutely some impact there. If you're talking about the curriculum, if you're talking about campus security, if you're talking about what happens in the lunchroom, certainly if you're talking about what's happening in the classroom, if you're talking about how we're forming them in faith, there's not a conversation that doesn't intersect in one way or another with DEI. And this is not just my work. This work belongs to us all. And so, being not only, having the privilege and the honor to be a part of senior staff, so I'm in that space where decisions are being made. So I'm not relying on anyone to carry the water for me. I also came in saying, I do this work, and you all have probably heard me say this work before, from a very Pavlovian perspective. You ring the bell and the dog salivates. When you see me coming, equity is on the table. And at some point, because my doctorate is in human development, so I believe in conditioning. At some point, I conditioned Jamal, so he's like, oh my God, here she comes, right? Jamal doesn't want to hear my mouth, so before I even enter the space, Jamal is already anticipating the challenge I may have. That's when the work has been institutionalized, because you're not the only person thinking about it. When we're having a curriculum meeting, before I walk in the room and they're already talking about what pedagogy, inclusive pedagogy, and what an inclusive classroom looks like, because I'm going to ask, right? We don't get upset when the football coach walks in or Jamal walks in and wants to put everybody out the gym because it's time for basketball practice. So don't get upset with me when I walk in the room and I ask you about equity, right? I told them diversity to me is a byproduct of equity and inclusion. That's gonna happen when you get your culture right. I'm not running out looking for Black folks. I'm not running out looking for brown folks. What I'm trying to do on my campus is change the narrative so that those people feel a sense of belonging and they feel welcome and they want to come, right? And so for me, and how do we hold those people accountable? Because I say, okay, and when you're new, you can kind of get away with this. This doesn't feel very Ignatian to me. Like, what is, tell me how this intersects with the gospel. Tell me, and I want to, and I'm looking at procedures, and I'm looking at policies, and I'm saying, hey, you know what? We have a policy that says we don't discriminate. We have a procedure that says we don't discriminate, but our practice says something else. We still hire the person we want to hire, right? So some of that accountability is getting them to understand that the way you believe you show up in the world is not the way you're showing up to people who don't believe, who are not a part of the dominant culture. So it is holding my senior, leadership team accountable. It is, and I'm really blessed. My president is phenomenal. I could not imagine working for anyone other than Father Ray Guiao. Like, he is amazing. Not only is he alum, but he is not part of that, dominant culture. When I think dominant culture, like, can you check, white and rich and racist? I mean, all these other things. No, he's not a part of that. But he went to school there and he experienced some of the discrimination there. So he is pushing it. My board is supportive. I hold my board accountable as well. So there are a plethora of folks that you you have to hold accountable. And it's calling things out. You know, someone said to me the other day, "Oh, we're not exclusive." And I chuckled and I'm like, "You're all boys school. What do you mean you're not exclusive? Like, but you were designed this way, right?" But often we don't have those difficult and uncomfortable conversations because we're all thinking it, but no one wants to say it. Now, we're not exclusive. You're a all boys school. What do you mean you're not, right? Misogyny lives here. And they look like, I can't believe she just said that. Well, it does. Sexism lives here. Racism lives here. Like, let's just call it what it is. But the other piece is, for me, and then I'll stop, is this commitment to restorative justice practices and what that looks like, and making people whole and closing the loop when there's an investigation and following up with people. And you know, restorative justice doesn't mean you know, always mean you have a stern conversation and then Jamal walks off and does what he wants to do. Our school's 133 years old, and you know, this requires a lot more context, but we sent our first student home for using the N-word and calling, you know, out folks inappropriately. We're not going to tolerate that here. So maybe you need to go home and reflect for a couple of days and then come back, do some educational work, and we need to document it in your disciplinary record. So if we continue to have problems, then maybe you need to leave our community. So there are a number of ways you can hold people accountable, which is why one person can't do this work.
Amen. The gospel according to Deborale. And I've been blessed to get so much wisdom from Deborale. So if I can, I know this question was submitted earlier and it's come up in our chat. So if we can get you guys to think about or give us some best practices in thinking about how do you go about auditing external communications so that all language, content, material is diverse, inclusive, and accessible. I know we talked about, I think both of you talked about creating a common language, obviously in the way that the community lives on a day-to-day basis, but do you all have any wisdom around particularly the comms department or who's writing external pieces for the school, and are there things in place that make sure that those things are regularly audited and thought about in a way that presents DEI in the best light for both of your schools?
Yeah, so 2 ways to answer that. It was definitely part of one of our subcommittees for the strategic plan is looking at our external communications, specifically what we put out on social media, what's on our website, what's in our publications. And I see it as something that has to be done intentionally, and I'll speak to that in a sec, but also as a byproduct, similar to what Deborale just said, as a byproduct of doing all this work and having community conversations and really raising the awareness and education level of your staff, everyone in the staff. Eventually, I've heard like people at the beginning of the year, you know, the team that manages social media says, "Hey, we want to make sure that we include all of our holidays, the ones that we send out on our Instagram account. Can you just double check that we have everyone?" Without me saying anything, right? So they were like, just as an example of, it's minor, right? And it's very symbolic, right? But it's still important, right? They're already thinking, like Deborale said, they're already thinking about that, right? And it was something that I attributed to, as we're moving the whole community towards that, you know, goal, that we now have teachers saying like, "Oh, you know, we are looking at, you know, our curriculum. Are we including more, you know, in the English department? Do we have more authors of color, things like that?" But specifically for communication, that was something that I think is as a byproduct. But you also have to have, you know, something written down, right? Some goals, right? And one of the ways that we did it is like we had both like the subcommittee members like literally looking at our magazines and saying like, does it reflect our community, right? Not only visually, but in the language, right? Who's the audience? What is the goal? Because that's what we're putting out there. But we also had students look at it, right? And that what the students said was really fascinating, right? It was like, you know, the way that they perceive it. So I would just say that how to do that, how to take an inventory, is just like I mean, I'm no that's not my background in marketing or anything like that, but just like it's really takes looking at, again, as we said, the common language and what are we putting out there, and does it reflect our community, not only what we say we are or who we are, but also who we actually are, right? And then if not, establishing metrics, we don't. We're featuring too many, like alumni stories. We're featuring too many alumni from the class of 2002, right? Okay, well, maybe we should like expand our, you know what I mean. So it's just things that we have done that has helped, again, byproduct of the things that we have already been doing in terms of pushing the whole community in one direction, but also having those metrics in terms of like, what are we putting out there? Does it reflect everyone? And if not, how do we remedy that? Do we need to, for example, like just, and then I'll be done. Whenever we are putting out their testimonies, I noticed, like we were really hitting on one particular family, right? That had a really good story. And it's like, great, good that we did that. But who else is out there that we're not really tapping into, right? That we're not highlighting. Why often it seems like when we have one good speaker or one good story, we do it over and over and over again, right? As opposed to really getting a sense of who else has in your community has again, for that reason, telling a good testimony. But for others, we can speak of other metrics, right? But that's what I have. Go ahead, Deborah.
Initially, I would say really sit down, with a group, and I'm big on kind of opportunities to engage and hear and get feedback from our internal group and then some external stakeholders. I think the first thing is what's the purpose of the survey? I mean, not the survey, of the website. Why do you have it, or do you even have one? St. Ignatius did not have one until until I arrived, and we just created one. So, what is the purpose? Is it to make people aware of the school? Is it a recruiting tool? Is it both for faculty, staff, and and students? I would speak to some internal and external stakeholders and get a true assessment of the narrative. What does your website say internally and externally? So that's important. Again, I mentioned that for us within Black and Brown communities, people were like, oh, you're rich, you're white, you're racist, you're Catholic, you're male. That's it. Like they had nothing else. And so, Carlos mentioned, audience, that's important. To whom are you speaking? The location of the website says a lot, right? If it's not on your major homepage, if I've got to click 16 times to find it, if it is more than one click away and it's not apparent that if you click on it, something's gonna open, if it's hidden, then it would suggest that it's not a priority. So I would also consider location. Certainly inclusive language, websites need to be intentional and strategic. I would say be authentic. Don't say you have something if you don't. I would say never use stock photos, right? Oh, these great kind of kumbaya moments where everybody looks like they get along, and all these Black and brown folks that you do not have, right? So don't use stock photos. I would say it's okay in those spaces to address success around DEI areas in your community, not in a kind of braggadocious way, but just like, hey, we're working on this. So, certainly communicate success stories. You want to create, language that's sustainable. And so make sure you have that. And then look for what's missing, what is not there. What are you doing that is not being addressed on your website? And certainly an internal site will be very different than an external site. And we have the one that's on our external facing website, but then we also have what is called Inside Ignatius, where I drop resources for the community. And then, check out you make sure your web page and your Facebook and your Twitter and your Instagram, whatever social media you use, that they're all consistent. Because if I see one place and I happen to check you out someplace else and I see something else, then certainly that raises some red flags for us. And again, it's just about being intentional and strategic in those spaces.
Awesome. Two great answers. So I know we're an hour in, we've got about 15 minutes left. I've got one question Lorraine threw in the chat, and then Melissa, my good friend Melissa Lowery, hit me up and was like, I got a question to ask. So I'm going to go, Melissa, why don't we go there? And then I'm going to take Lorraine's question and expand it on because I think it speaks to a little bit about coming obstacles with our colleagues. So go ahead, Melissa.
Thanks, Jamal. And thank you, Deborale and Carlos, for doing this for us today. So just kind of keeping in the communications field, I think a challenge for us is there's definitely been the sort of separation of we have our business side and we have our academic side, and there's always been sort of a disconnect there as far as PD goes. Like, obviously we all get the same sort of training, but it feels like it's a different set of rules from the business side. And it does feel like often when it comes down to content from our office and also sort of, that accountability factor of, are we really who we say we are? Are we really portraying and putting all of these things out there as far as communication goes on our social media? But there's still this fear of what do I want to say? Of disrupting the brand, of protecting the institution, protecting the brand. And so we really have been really challenged with that. And of course, it's all kind of coded language when we bring stuff up of, for instance, we've been told if we want to, post something about Chinese New Year, we'll say, hey, can you just put this out, like happy Lunar New Year, woohoo, this is awesome, we hope everybody has a great celebration and a great day. They want a quote from a Chinese student, they want a quote from they want all this extra stuff to show how our community, basically to show proof that we can post something that everybody's posting, right? So there's this where I'm like, that's where we come into tokenizing our students and tokenizing faculty. And there's this, and then we get this sort of coded language of, no, we're supporting or we're engaging. And it's like, it's not on the onus of our, BIPOC community or whichever group that you're wanting to, uplift, for them to be receipts, because that's what it feels like sometimes, that we're like receipts for the school, because, but most of this is coming from, just like I said, it feels like protecting the brand and the institution versus the community and the people in the institution. So any thoughts about that as far as just navigating, through some of that?
Oh, my friend, that's a deep question. Complex. Yeah, I certainly understand what you're saying. The first thing that came to mind for me, and I'll be brief because I know that we have a little bit of time, was sometimes related to that brand was like the perception of who the school was, and that's particularly from alumni that often are big donors, right, and bring in money and all that. So there's this presence above us that we don't see, but are like, it seems to have a lot of power, right? We've had a situation a few years ago in which the alumni were saying, like, no, a lot of alumni publicly were saying, that's not the Bellarmine that I remember, I'm pulling away my donation, right? And there was some concerns about that, and I don't think I don't have a great answer for you. I because it's very complex and it's very nuanced, and you're right, Melissa. It's there's tokenizing when we want to do certain things, or but what I will say is that I want to give a shout out to my administration, because in terms of really having the bravery, you know, the courage to say to those folks is, we're going to listen to you. You're an important part of our community, but Bellarmine is different now. And we're moving in this direction. And we're moving in this direction not because it's the coolest new thing out there, you know, like latest fad. No, because it's based on mission. We're a Jesuit school and we're doing this. So that's that. In that way, we've responded to some of that backlash from alumni specifically, or parents that had this perception of who we are in terms of the brand. But it's not nearly enough. I mean, I'm not even beginning to scratch some of the, you know, the points that you're bringing, which is very, very challenging. So I don't know, Deborale, what do you have to say?
Yeah, I agree. Those are challenges, and often the calisthenics kind of involved with doing this work is daunting, right? Because before I can get to the good work, I've got to jump over 56 hurdles, run around the corner, you know, stand on my head, clap 3 times, right? By then I'm exhausted and I don't even really want to do it anymore. So before I forget, if you are engaged in this work, please take care of yourself. Self-care is so important because you will burn out. And especially if you happen to be the sole soldier on your campus pushing this work and receiving the pushback and you know, trying to help people understand and educating people and talking about, it's daunting, right? So please take care of yourself. You know, when I think about kind of the brand, I'm trying to figure out, and again, I always try this back to mission, to the gospel, like whose brand are you protecting? Because you don't need to protect Jesus. He got this, right? I just need you to do what he said, right? You just do what he is asking us to do, and the brand will take care of itself. And I often walk around and say to people, like people come to my office, and I'm quick to say, I just want you to do this. I hold up the mission, right? It used to be on my wall. I took it down because as soon as someone comes in and there's some pushback, right? Deborale is not asking you to do this. I'm asking you to be what you said you are on this paper. And that's it. Oh, okay, so you don't want to be that. I'm with you, right? And I'll say that quick, right? Ultimately, it is your decision because I don't make any decision alone on my campus. I don't hire people. I don't fire people. I don't do any of those things, right? My leadership team and my president, I am so blessed. They are so, you know, in step with this. I cannot think of anything, to be completely honest, that I have asked for. Now they've been modified and all those other types of things that my leadership team hasn't said, yes, you're right. We want to work on our narrative. We need a web page, and it needs to be, you know, we need a website, and it needs to be off the front page. Now, I will also tell you that Lisa Metro and Angela O'Donnell and Annie Brennan in my marketing department, if your marketing department is struggling and they're going to kill me, Aaron, make sure you take this part out. If you have questions, reach out to them. I'm making more work for them. They are fantastic. They get that I am trying to shift the narrative and what that inclusive language looks like, and when we speak and when we don't. So remember, right after, you know, George Floyd was killed, people came back and they were like, okay, Deborale, we need to make a statement. We need to, okay. I was like, okay, take a breath. Take a breath. Because what we are not going to do is react the way the rest of the world is. We are going to respond. And guess what? Unfortunately, he will still be dead tomorrow. And we will be evoking his name for years. So don't feel like before the sun comes up, you need to say something, right? So, you know, as you're doing this and you're trying to figure out the brand, like I'm trying to figure out who it is you're trying to protect. And at the end of the day, what you're trying to protect is this, how we've created this system, right? And I'm helping my community address some of the inequities in our system. You're trying to protect traditionally, right, what has been exclusive about us, right? And then people say, oh, we're not exclusive. Okay, well, you have an alumni golf tournament. I like golf. I'm not an alumni. Like there are multiple opportunities to just say, hey, yeah, you really are. You really are exclusive. You really don't use inclusive language. You really do ostracize people, you know, and my community is like, wow. And part of my job is to bring those things to your attention, increase the level of awareness. So you can't say you didn't know. And that's some of the challenge with a passive aggressive kind of community, right? You don't say it because you don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I tell them all the time, like, there's some days when I think, "Ooh, I'm just so smart." Right? I haven't had one of those in a long time, Melissa, right? So I'm thinking what you all are thinking, but because of the culture and how we communicate and the things we say, we don't want to cause conflict, then we don't say anything. And so, I am saying to my community, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And guess what? Welcome to my world. People of color and women should not be the only people who are uncomfortable here. Now, I'm not trying to push my community so far and so quickly that they panic and shut down, but let's have some authentic conversations. Let's stop using baby language. We're adults. Let's talk about racism. Let's stop candy coating it, right? The other piece is, and then I'm going to stop, relationships are so important. I feel so blessed to have had 2 years in my community before I really started doing this work, right? Because I spent that year developing relationships. So now when I go to Jamal, and my president said this, I had a meeting with my board, and I said, your greatest challenge is that you're culturally incompetent. And they looked at me, and my president, because we were on Zoom, and I watched their faces, and they were like, wow. And my board chair said, I don't know that anyone's ever said that to me. And I felt like it was okay, right? Because I developed those relationships and you know where it's coming from. This is not malicious. This is not hateful, but you need to hear that this is our greatest challenge. So it's tough, and they don't sometimes don't even realize not only the bias, and some of it, we can play games and we can say it's unconscious, but some of this stuff, yes, you do. And let's just call it when you know it, so we can address the elephant in the room, right? And so the calisthenics that make the work so difficult is what we have to talk about. And again, I wanted a website, and my folks said, yes, we need a website. What does that look like? Who's the audience? What's the message? I wanted to examine our disciplinary process. I am hearing from the community that it's not equitable, that Black and brown kids are getting more. I want to explore that. What are we doing with restorative justice? How are we making people whole? They said, okay. I said, you know what? I'm sick of kids, Black and brown boys feeling like they don't have a space on this campus. I need a space. And they said, okay, we'll find you a space. We'll find a space for you to have a multicultural center on our campus. So I think that, but we've also had our hands slapped so much. The last big time, we were in the news, it was ugly. And we can't, we can't pretend like we don't know, because the community continues to tell.
All right. I think I know we're bumping up against it, Aaron. I would love. I know there was a question, and Lorraine is my friend. I know she's probably interested in, Carlos, there was a question about just like kind of like bringing along our colleagues in this work, and getting them energized or engaged, or from reticence to mobilized. And I'm just wondering if, to close up for both of you guys in the 2 or 3 minutes we got left, if you might speak to that, strategies about bringing along. I would say, what I have found in my work right there, the choir, they're easy to bring along, right? There's the unknown, and then the reticent, and those that are they're not sure, I should say, that middle group, and then the reticent, and maybe speak to those spaces, and then we can call. This has been awesome thus far, but go from there.
Super quick, and I talked a little bit about that in the recording. I didn't understand. I didn't gain this insight until many years after I've been in the job. Was that what we've talked about is like, okay, do DI, go ahead, and like, okay, like how do I figure it out? And having very little guidelines in general, from the school, from JSN, from the province, and realizing that the work of changing the culture and the practices of very old institutions takes time and takes a village, takes more than one person. So I spent some time similar to what Deborale said was, developing the relationships and creating spaces to bring in those voices into your corner, creating like a table for them, an actual table, including, there's one for students, there's one for faculty and staff, and parents, right? That's how when we have those three constituencies helping you in this work, supporting, collaborating, that's when I've really found that we can do some really amazing work that I would not be able to do alone, or anyone, whoever was sitting in this chair. So it was just that opportunity to, it's specifically for the question asked for faculty and staff. It really, it was after we had done our summit and we've done all this work of creating more and more awareness and buy-in from the faculty, there was an increased sense of like awareness, ownership, and hype. And it's okay, we need you. Hey, welcome. So here it is. This is committee. Do you want to come? Great. The invitation went out to the whole staff, and it was very awesome, really encouraging to see that we had members from like staff, department chairs, people from, that were coaches. So our current Equity and Inclusion Committee has 16 members plus me. And it's very representative of our community, right? Campus ministry, CSP, etc., immersion. And then, not only are they there, but then, the challenge for me, and then is like, okay, so then how we have this group of really interested folks, how do we get them energized and giving them like opportunities to help you in this mission? And that's the challenge that I could get into. But it's been wonderful to again, building the capacity among our community, but in creating those spaces and making them meaningful, working towards a goal, which in this case was to create a strategic plan so that we can make our school better. So there you go.
I'll close by saying collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. Any space that you have an opportunity to enter, make time for it, whether it's hiring, whether it's admissions. The other day, I was a judge at a dance contest for the middle school kids, right? Make sure that you are collaborating. Touch your faculty, your staff, all of your key stakeholders, your faculty, your staff, your students, your parents, your alumni. Alumni can sometimes, be really difficult. And I've had my alumni reach out and say things like, what you're doing is divisive and all these other kind of things. Spend time there. To the point about kind of this bell curve, right? I love the choir. And I love to have those conversations. They fill me up all the time. We at St. Nations, we've got that huge part of the bell curve where folks are somewhat indifferent. They want to see, is this really going to work? They want to see, if I step out there and I support, will I be ostracized? Will I get my hand slapped? And then those folks, as Jamal mentioned, who are reticent, those are the people I love the most. I love the naysayers. I do. They don't realize they drive the work. As soon as they say, I don't know, or you didn't communicate, bam, I'm off communicating, right? I'm not listening to Jamal because Jamal already knows. I'm listening to the person who says, you can't do it. It doesn't work. It's divisive. So I'm figuring out, how do I bring people together? We don't know. What message, how do I communicate? Maybe I'm not sending the message to the right people. Maybe we need to put it in the school magazine. Maybe I need to put it on the website. Listen to the naysayers, right? Doing this work, and it takes a lot, right? I've been doing it a while. And so I go into it and it is not personal. I don't know you. I didn't take the last wings at Quaker State last night. There's no reason for you to be upset with me personally, right? What you are upset with is the shifting in the soil that you feel that provides an equitable framework for people. People don't care about diversity as long as it stays in its place. People don't care about inclusion as long as they have the most. I'll give you $1, but make sure I get $5. People are concerned about equity. What does that look like? Some of the first questions people ask me is, well, how many students of color are you looking to bring in? The real question was, how many seats are you taking away from white kids? That's what you really want to know when you ask me, because we only have so many desks, right? We only have so many spaces for students. And when you ask me, how many students of color are you looking to bring? What you really want to know is how many white seats am I taking away? So I ask that. Okay, well, what I really hear you saying is this, right? Listen to those naysayers. They will tell you what you need to do in this space. And then try not to take it personally. It can become personal because once it's personal, I say this to my students all the time, once you internalize negative feedback and it gets you off your game, you lose sight of the big picture. And so this whole time while I'm trying to fight this one alumni who wants to remind me that he pays my salary, who wants to say I'm divisive, who wants to talk about all these other things, I'm not doing the real work. Right. And so, it's hard to kind of let it roll off your back. And one of the other things coming from corporate America is, and I know we don't like to think about who we are as a business. We like to think of it as a family and a community and all that good stuff. Right. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. And that's why your advancement office is afraid. And so what I have done in that space is as we've had conversations about people are going to pull their money, I've gone to my Black and Brown alumni, to my alumni who are out, to my moms who didn't feel like they were included because there was a alumni or dad's golf thing. I need you to step up. I need you to give. What I've said to my alumni is every one of you that I've spoken with said, you went here because of your family, you received scholarships and you were on financial aid. When we look at the dollars contributed by people of color, Black and brown people didn't pay for that. White people gave that money, right? And so you should feel some level of obligation to give back to the school so that other kids who look like you can have this experience. Do not allow them to hold that over our head. They want to take their money. I need you to fill it back up. It's also important to get white men in this conversation. Give them permission to be diverse. Help them understand the language, because if white men are not a part of it, some of them will not support it because they're fearful. So for me, it's this, to me, this work, the powerful work that you all do that I can't thank you enough for, is what makes Jesuit education relevant in the 21st century. We're not asking our students, St. Ignatius is no longer asking our students to just be academically competent. Part of our grad evolves to now we want you to also be culturally competent. And what does that mean? So, there's a lot more here. I think, Carlos, I always give people extra work. Carlos and I have dropped our emails there. Please don't, hesitate to reach out. Anything I can do to assist or support. We didn't get into assessment, but one of the things we're looking at, we're utilizing our campus now, is the IDI. So if you've not done that on your campus, or if you have and you're looking at ways to infuse those results into your strategy, DEI strategy, please don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm so grateful to have had this opportunity.
Absolutely. We all belong to the Ignatian family, or even if you're not at Jesuit school, you're here through ISN. So whatever we can do to support each other and be in community so that we can work together in this important work that affects all of us, not only in our context, but in our network, in our nation, and we need more hands on board. So absolutely reach out. There's there's going to be always a disposition to support each other. That it certainly happened to me. I haven't done this work alone. So yes.
And Jamal, we love you, and we're going to miss you when you go. And please stay connected, all the group hugs, and thank you for welcoming me into this space. Congratulations on your new position. You will be fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. This is family. So I will be here. I promise you, I will be not too far away. So again, thank you for everybody. I know it's going to be an awesome recording, Aaron.